How are you all? My name is Matt Graham. I'm a member of the volunteer board of the Savannah Book Festival. And on behalf of the board, thank you so much for coming out to the event this weekend and to this event this morning. It's great to have you here. If you've heard the spiel already today at one of these events, I apologize in advance. This is probably going to end up being like a public broadcasting fundraising week by the end of the day for you. But the board's coming out this year to remind you all of the Yellow Bucket program, which you will see here, in which you could donate cash if you like. Or on the back of your program is a QR code for a Venmo link that can allow you to donate as well. The 16 years of the festival, we've been allowed and excited and proud of throwing our Saturday event at absolutely no charge to anyone and having over 40 authors come in. And what we found this year is that the expense of doing that has really grown quite a bit, mostly with the transportation and housing of our talent that comes in. So if you are in a position, yeah, John, it's all your fault. So if you're in a position to help, we would very much appreciate it, and thank you. And hopefully you don't get the spiel 28 more times today. John, if you were in contact with a parallel world that has funds available, please feel free to encourage them to send them our way, whenever you like. Enjoy the event today. Thank you very much.
I don't think we take crypto, though. Good morning, fellow book lovers. I'm Sheila Grossman, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this third session of the Savannah Book Festival for its 16th year. This year's festival is presented by the Philip E. and Nancy B. Beekman Foundation, David and Nancy Cintron, Robert Faircloth, the Courtney Knight Gaines Foundation, and the Gerald D. and Helen M. Stevens Foundation, with a special thanks to a grant from Georgia Humanities. We are especially grateful to Joe Hart and Marie Park for sponsoring the Savannah Theater this morning. We'd also like to welcome a special welcome to our generous sponsors and literati members. As Matt told you, the festival is really run primarily through donations. 90% of our revenue comes from our donors and our literati members, and we thank you. This year's festival is full of great events and authors. If you haven't already done so, please download the Savannah Book Festival app on your phone, and you can keep up to date on everything that's going on. If you need more information about how to do that, it's on the back of your program. Before we get started, I have a couple of announcements. John Scalzi will be signing festival purchase copies of his book in Telfair Square immediately following this presentation. Please take a moment to make sure that your cell phones are turned off, and we ask that you do not use flash photography. On the back of your program, you'll find a QR code for a survey. We hope that as the day progresses, you'll take a moment to share your opinion. This survey helps with continuous improvement and measures the impact the festival has on the city. Your response is important to the funding of the arts in our community. We'll have the opportunity for questions and answers at the end of the talk. We would appreciate if you'd raise your hand and wait for a microphone to come to you. We would like everybody to be able to hear your question. John Scalzi is with us today, courtesy of E. Shaver Bookseller, as well as Trina Johnson Fisher, in loving memory of her son, Kyle Johnson. John Scalzi is one of the most popular science fiction authors of his generation. His debut, Old Man's War, won him the John W. Campbell Award for Best New Writer. His New York Times bestsellers include The Last Colony, Fuzzy Nation, Red Shirts, which won the 2013 Hugo Award for Best Novel, and 2020's The Last Emperox. Material from his blog, which is called Whatever, has earned him 2 other Hugo Awards. He lives in Ohio with his wife and daughter. Please join me in giving a warm Savannah welcome to John Scalzi.
I always love that introduction because it's the one that my PR people have sent. And it doesn't start hard or anything. He's the most popular writer of his generation. And I'm just like, oh, bless you. Bless your heart. I'm so excited to be here today. This is the first time in Savannah, and I absolutely love it. I'm also excited that I have friends here who I've known for years, and then also one of my editors from my newspaper days is here, and that goes way back. I was plucked to be the film critic for the Fresno Bee back in 1991 when I was just literally coming out of college. I was so young that the nickname for me at the Bee for the first couple of years was Doogie Howser MC for music, for movie critic. And the very first time I went to one of the local theaters to review one of the R-rated films, they actually carded me, right? I don't have that problem anymore. But it causes me to reflect just on this fact that the trip from there, being a budding journalist, to now where I'm standing on a stage in front of you has been surreal, right? Like I never expected that this would be my path, that I would end up being a full-time science fiction novelist who actually does that these days. But here I am, and it's just a thrill. It really is that thing that, we say, it's great if you have a job that every day you wake up and you're sort of excited to do it. I don't do that. Some days I wake up and I'm just like, I just want to go back to sleep. But I am always just stunned that I've managed to get away with this for so long. And it's not imposter syndrome because, I do what I do and I'm pretty good at it. But it's kind of the opposite of imposter syndrome, which is like, I've gotten away with it again. Which brings me to the Kaiju Preservation Society. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about how I came to write the Kaiju Preservation Society because it's kind of a funny story. I'm going to read just a tiny bit from the Kaiju Preservation Society, and then we're going to go ahead and just go straight into questions because if you know anything about me at all, when you ask me a simple question, I will answer it for 6 minutes straight. So we want to make sure we have a lot of time for that. As mentioned, we are going to have microphones going up and down. I do have rules about questions, and they're very simple, which is one question should be in the form of a question. The other thing is the question should be a one-part question. And the third thing is that the question should be about tweet length, which is about 280 characters. And the reason for that is so that, given the fact that I blather on, we can get to as many questions as possible during the course of the Q&A session. So your cooperation there will be appreciated. And if you don't cooperate, I'll just be like, is there a question here? And that's embarrassing for us both. So the Kaiju Preservation Society was kind of a surprise novel. It was not the novel that I had intended to write and to have come out. And to start this novel, or to start the tale of this novel, I actually have to go back to March of 2020, when, as I'm sure you remember, there was this obscure disease that nobody had ever heard about called COVID-19, and it had just become a craze and was sweeping the nation. And the way that I found out that it had hit in a particular big way was I was on a cruise. Now, this was like one of the last cruises that actually left the United States and ended up being one of the last ones that was allowed to come back to the United States. It was literally this cruise, it was called the Joko Cruise, and an 80s themed cruise that another friend of mine went on. And she was like, I almost got stuck on a boat for 6 weeks with Kaja Gugu. And the thing is that we had all known that something was going on. We were all, we all were, doing the thing with our hands and using the sanitizers. Like, do we shake hands? Do we hug? And what we had decided on for the boat was bumping elbows, which was a craze that did not actually make it out of the boat, which I think is probably best for everybody. But we knew that there was a problem. But the thing is like we made it on the boat. I had a rule that whenever I was on the boat, because I've done the JoCo cruise a number of years, I'm the literary director for it, which is how I scam getting on this cruise every year, that I don't watch news. For a week, the world can take care of itself, right? I absolutely do not want to know what's going on. So up until the Wednesday, March 11th, it worked perfectly fine. I had no idea what was going on in the world. And then on Wednesday, I was just walking down the Lido deck, as one does, and people started coming up to me, and they were like, "Have you heard about Tom? Have you heard about Tom?" Like multiple people, "Have you heard about Tom?" I'm like, what is this? Who the hell is Tom? Why do I need to know about him? Is this some sort of weird prank? Because nobody else was being run up to and asking, "Have you heard about Tom?" I thought it was like some sort of weird, "Who is John Galt?" sort of thing, right? And I'm like, finally I was like, who the hell is Tom and why do I care? Turns out that Tom is Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks on March 11th had announced that he was diagnosed with COVID-19, he and his wife Rita Wilson, while he was in Australia filming that Elvis movie. And so, and he was like, "I'm alive, everything's fine." But he was the first major celebrity to be struck with COVID-19. And the reason people were asking me if I had heard about Tom, have I heard about Tom, have I heard about Tom, was I had lunch with Tom Hanks about 2 weeks before I got on the boat. And so when they were asking me about Tom, what they were saying is, we're concerned about you and your friend Tom Hanks. Well, what they really were saying is, "Are you patient zero?" So we did the math, and it turned out that I was just outside of the infection penumbra with Tom Hanks. And when I got back, I sent him a strongly worded email. I was like, "I was on a cruise, you son of a bitch. What were you doing?" It's like, and he says, "I'm sorry, I didn't intend to get the COVID-19. And I was like, "All right, Tom Hanks, who can stay mad at you? You're America's dad." I was actually just at the green room, and someone was like, "You can't be mad if Tom Hanks gives you COVID-19. He's America's dad. That's a story you can tell." I was like, "Yeah, if you still have lungs." We get off the boat. We are literally, like I said, literally the last people, and then we go into the COVID hibernation. And they initially, of course, tell us it's only going to be about 2 weeks. It's not going to be a problem, all that sort of stuff. And of course, it stretches, and it stretches, and it stretches. And the thing is as a writer, I don't particularly mind because I am an introvert, and I don't want to see people anyway. And then I was like, well, this isn't going to be a problem because all this means is that I will not be distracted by having to do tours or go to events or anything else. I can just focus on writing. That was my plan. I was going to focus on writing. Well, as it turns out, 2020 was a really bad year for focus. Not only because of COVID-19, although that was a thing, but I don't know if you remember this, but it was an election year. And it was a pretty contentious election year. And my first job was as a newspaper person. And while I was at the newspaper, they had decided at one point or two to actually give me an opinion column. I was a 24-year-old white man with an opinion column, and you can imagine how that went. Thank you, by the way, I'm looking at my editor, thank you for not actually strangling me back then. But I was journalistically trained to always look at the news and formulate an opinion. It's one of the reasons that I had a blog where I wrote every day for 25 years about whatever was going on in the world. And so I couldn't look away. Now, the book that I was writing at the time was meant to be a sort of dark and gritty political thriller that takes place in space. I described it to people as Das Boot in space. And the problem with that book was that usually whatever's going on in the world, I can just escape into the world that I was creating for the book, right? and just ignore everything that was going on. But the problem is when you are writing a thing that is about, cynical, dark, gritty, about politics in space, it's not an escape from the real world of 2020. And so I would start writing this book, and I would just freeze up, and then I would try writing it again, and I would come in a different way and a different angle. And I ended up writing 60,000 words of this book. And it was the same 10,000 words over and over and over again. And then in November and December, I got something that all the tests said was not COVID, but turned my brain to jelly anyway. I literally couldn't think of anything that was more substantial than I really like cheese, which is a good thought. Who doesn't like cheese? I eat it every day, and I'm a cheese enjoyer. But it's not a great thing when you're trying to write a book. And so that was 2 months of the year that was also gone. And I finally get to January. I'm like, new year, new me. I'm going to go ahead and start writing this thing again. It's going to be great. And I'm just going to, baby steps, we'll just get into it. Well, the first work day of 2020 was January 4th. And that was a Monday. And I wrote 250 words, which is far below what I usually write. But like I said, baby steps. Okay, that's fine. And then I was like, okay, January 5th, I wrote 500 words. And I'm like, this is a geometrical progression. This is great. The book will be done by the end of the week. So the next day was January 6th. At least 3 of you are laughing. 3 of you remember what happened on January 6th of 2020. And at that point, I was like, I'm done. I am done until we actually have a change of administration, because who knows what's going to happen between now and January 20th. January 20th happens. I wait an extra 10 days because you never know, which is a hell of a thing to say. I never would have said that before, but here we were in 2021, January of 2021. And then I was like, finally, okay, everything's fine. We're doing all right. The boring people are in the White House right now. I can focus on my writing. And so I sat down and I wrote 4,000 words in this book, and it was great. I was like, this is fantastic. This is what I should have been writing like 7 months ago. I am happy. This is good. I am on my way. I will actually hit my deadline, which is depressingly close. And because again, if there's anything that journalism teaches you, you do not miss a deadline. You could break an arm or a leg, but you still file that story on time, right? But I'm gonna hit that deadline. I go to bed, I feel great. I wake up the next morning full of ideas about this book that I'm writing. I go to access the chapter that I had written, and it's gone. Which is impossible, because we live now in an era where it automatically saves. It automatically saves locally. It automatically saves to the cloud. It automatically emails my 6th grade teacher, just to let him know that I have actually become a writer. All of these things, it should not have disappeared. But it did absolutely disappear. I just could not find it. I searched on the cloud. I've searched on my actual computer. I looked everywhere, and it was gone. And at that moment, I had an epiphany. I hate this book. I hate this book. I hate everything about this book. This book is a synecdoche for 2020 itself. With all the COVID, all the politics, all the bullshit, everything about it, just hate it. And I hate the way it makes me feel. So I write my editor, Patrick Nielsen Hayden, and I say to him, I can't. I'm like, I just can't do it anymore. I can't write this book. I hate it. It hates me. Everything about it is awful. I just feel like a horrible person when I write it, not because it's, not like Strangling Kitten horrible, but just like feel bad. I can't do it anymore. I don't know what to tell you. I've never missed a deadline before, and I haven't. I have gotten to the point where I literally turn it in on 7 a.m. on the day it is due, but I've turned it in. I was telling the folks I went with lunch with yesterday, the folks from eShaver Books, that there one time I wrote a book in 2 weeks because I looked at my calendar and it was like, oh, the book's due June 18th and it's June 4th. And I turned to my wife and I was like, you will slip me food under the door. There will be a gallon jug that once a day you will take out. This is the way it's going to be for the next 2 weeks. And she said no to the gallon jug, but fine for everything else. And we actually got the book done on time. So this was the first time that I was just going to completely blow a deadline. And you have no idea what that did to me as a former journalist and someone who had always thought of themselves as reliable. I will turn in this book and it will be a good book and it will be turned in on time. This was a massive failure to me. And then, but as I was writing and I was thinking about it and I was telling this to Patrick, I was like, look, one, it won't be a good book. I could get it on time. It would be a terrible book, and then you would have a terrible book, and we would be in the same position, except there would be a book that none of us would like to have. And the other thing is there's a quote by a video game maker, which was, a delayed video game is often a good video game. A bad video game is bad forever, which now is no longer true because they patch, but you can't patch books. And so I would rather miss a deadline than to turn in a bad book. And that's ultimately, there's no point in being reliable if what you are reliably doing is not good. The good news is, so I sent off this email, just, the hardest email that I've ever had to send as a novelist, off to Patrick. And Patrick, to his credit, was very gracious. It turns out that Patrick had also experienced 2020. So he got it. And he was like, look, I get it. It's fine. We will take the book off the schedule. I don't want you to worry about that, even though we've already started marketing it, and even though we've already paid someone to do the cover. It's fine. I was like, nice. But he really was. He was like, it's fine. We will figure it out. You've earned credit to have this collapse, and it's been 2020 anyway. And that was just a huge relief that just came off the top of my, the weight that came off of my shoulders. And I was just like, the only thing after that to do, after being absolved by my editor, saying, I understand, we will figure it out, don't worry about it. I was like, this is, the only thing left to do is to go take a shower. And as I'm standing there in the shower and the water's just hitting me and I'm just having that wave of relief that this weight has been lifted from my skull, a little voice in the back of my head, and I swear to God this is true, a little voice in the back of my head was like, oh, okay, so just so you know, while you were panicking for months about that book you were never going to write, I've been thinking of a little something in the back here in the back of your head, and it's called the Kaiju Preservation Society, and here it is, whonk! And literally the entire book, stem to stern, dropped into my skull. Because some part of my brain knew that I would need this thing probably around February of 2021. And just the whole thing just came up. Just, starting from the name, the Kaiju Preservation Society, and just everything came from there. And I did two things. I finished taking the shower because I needed it, because of all the flop sweat. And then I immediately went and emailed my editor, and the email was no caps, no punctuation. Hey, remember that thing that I told you where I was not going to be able to finish the book on time? Well, I thought of a new thing, and it's going to be great, and it's going to get to you in 6 weeks. Don't worry, ping. 5 weeks later, here's the Kaiju Preservation Society. And it turns out the Kaiju Preservation Society was absolutely 100% the book I needed to write. Because, like I said, I've been trying to write this gritty, timely, political thriller thing, and I picked the wrong time. What I needed to do at that point is to just be like, screw it, I'm going to write a book about monsters, right? And don't worry if it's deep, don't worry if it's any, just have fun writing this. And this is something that writers, particularly career writers, forget. That ultimately, if you are not enjoying writing, readers will know. They will know that you are not happy. They will know that you have not enjoyed the process. They will know that this didn't work for you. And they'll know because it shows up in your book. No matter how good you are with the craft, no matter how facile you are with your turns of phrase, that you did not enjoy the writing. That doesn't mean that if you're having a bad day that you will turn in crap. Or it doesn't mean that if things are happening in your life that are bad or difficult or whatever, that the book will necessarily reflect that. But it will absolutely show up if you are not feeling joy or refuge or entertainment for your own self in the book. So I just wrote the book that I gave myself permission to do nothing but have fun with it. And it was, and honestly, after 2020 and after everything else that had gone on and after the struggle that I had with writing, it reconnected me with the idea that I actually love writing. Not that it was just my job, but that it was a thing that excites me, that makes me happy to get up in the morning, that nourishes me, if you want to put it that way. I hate the word nourish, but there's no similar word in the English language that works in the same way. And that it just was the right book for me to write. Whether it was good, in some ways was sort of immaterial to me. It was just literally the thing I needed to write. And I wrote it, and I sent it in, and Patrick was like, well, this is great. This is exactly what I needed to read right now. And I'm like, why, thank you, Patrick. I appreciate that. And then the book eventually comes out, and the thing that I hear about this book, because I always hear one thing or another, there's kind of a theme with every book that comes out. The email that I get from this particular book literally is, I needed this book. I needed something to disconnect me from the rage of the world. I needed something that was just fun. I needed escapism. And this is something that I think is important. I mean, I write a lot of escapism. I write a lot of entertaining fluff. And I don't really feel bad about that. I think I'm good at entertaining fluff. Entertaining fluff is my lane. It's why I have a 13-book contract. But I think the fact of the matter is that we sometimes underappreciate the thing that just lets our brain disconnect. One of the things that I talk about in the afterword of this book is that it is a pop song. It's a 3-minute pop song. Like you go in, you're like, oh, this is, you got the beat, you don't quite remember the verses, but the chorus you know by heart, and you're just like, as you go on down the freeway with that song. It's there, it's 3 minutes, it's out, and when you're done with that song, you're like, that was great. You know, those 3 minutes change the trajectory of your mood and your attitude and your day. This is what that was for a lot of people. And I'm actually super proud of the fact that people read this book and came out of the experience happier for it. Is this, and I say to people, is this a Nobel Prize winner? No. Is this going to be the book that, changes people's lives, forever? No. But it is going to change their life for one day. And that one day is actually sometimes all you need. So I'm super proud of this book. I'm super proud I wrote it. I don't suggest anybody write this book like I ended up writing this book. Because people are like, that's amazing, you wrote that book in just 5 weeks? I was like, no, I wrote it in 5 weeks after a year of grinding my gears. So don't do that. Try to do something else. But of all the books that I have written, like I said, and I've written, quite a lot of books at this point. This one, in a very strange way, is near and dear to my heart because it was the right book at the right time. So, yeah, that's that story. So that's how I wrote the Kaiju Preservation Society. It's 12 o'clock now, and I'm supposed to go to 12:20, right? Yes. Do you want me to read a little bit from it, or do you want to just go straight to questions? I'm asking you. I mean, you want to read? All right, I'm going to read a very short scene, and then we'll go to questions. This short scene is actually about vaccinations. 2020, am I right? So for those of you who have not read the book, the idea is that the main character is Jamie Gray. Jamie Gray has been laid off from a job at a startup that is a food delivery startup. And because COVID has hit, the only job Jamie can get is to be a delivery person for the same food delivery app that they used to be an executive for, right? And one of the people that they continually deliver to is a guy named Tom. And they have conversation. It turns out that they've known each other. They went to the University of Chicago together, all that sort of stuff. And on the last day when the food delivery app has been bought by Uber Eats and Jamie's been cut from the delivery staff, and it's like, I have no idea what I'm going to do. I'm going to drink a bottle of vodka. After that, I have no idea. Tom offers Jamie a job, and the job is with an entity called KPS, which we find later is called the Kaiju Preservation Society, and Tom describes it, sort of vaguely as a animal rights group for very large animals. And so Jamie, who doesn't have a job, has rent due, everything else, goes to the job interview and gets the job interview. But one of the things that they have to do is they have to have a medical examination, and they have to get vaccinated. And so this is the vaccination scene, and again, doesn't know about what kind of large animals they are about to encounter, but knows that they have to get vaccinated. The thing to know, just as you're listening to this, is the doctor in this is named Dr. Lee. I went to school with a person who is now Dr. Lee. Dr. Lee is more popularly known in the consciousness of America as Dr. Pimple Popper. So when you listen to me do this scene, imagine Dr. Sandra Lee giving these vaccines. I've told her, by the way, she's tickled pink about this. Let's do this first and get it over with, Dr. Lee said, before shoving a cotton swab through my nostril all the way back into my brain. This was usually the last part of my physical, this was actually the last part of my physical, which I was informed I had passed, but the first part of the vaccine regimen. Well, that was fun, I said when it was done. If you think that's fun, let's not ever meet socially, Dr. Lee said. She packed up the swab to be tested. You don't look like you're infected, but of course no one ever looks like they're infected at the beginning, so we'll just be sure. In the meantime, let's get you shot up. She reached into a cabinet and pulled down a tray holding a series of syringes. What are those? I asked. Well, these are your basic vaccinations, she said. Just the usual stuff, new and boosters, measles, mumps, rubella, multispectral flu, chickenpox, smallpox. Smallpox? Yes, why? It's extinct. You would think so, wouldn't you? She held up one of the syringes. This is new, COVID vaccine. It's out? Well, technically it's experimental. Don't tell your friends. They'll just be jealous. Now, how much international travel have you done? Not much. Canada for a conference last year. Mexico as an undergrad for spring break. Asia, Africa. I shook my head. Dr. Lee harumphed and reached up for another tray of syringes. I started counting and got nervous. Dr. Lee noticed, I promise you, you want the shots more than you want what they're protecting you from, she said. I believe you, it's just a lot. She patted my shoulder. That's not a lot. She reached up again and pulled down a final tray. It had at least 10 syringes on it. There, now that's a lot. Jesus, I actually moved away from the tray table. What the hell are those? Well, they told you you would be working with big animals, right? Yeah, and? Okay, so, Dr. Lee pointed to the closest syringes in the new tray. Those are for the diseases the animals could give to you. She pointed further down. Those are for the diseases their parasites could give you. She pointed to the last. And those are for the diseases you can catch just by existing in the open air. It's like, holy crap. Look at it this way, she said. We're not only protecting you from them, we are protecting them from you. Can't you just give them to me all at once in like an IV drip or something? Oh, no, that would be bad. Some of these vaccines don't react well to the others. And yet you're going to put them all into my body. Well, we have a specific order they go in, she said. So your bloodstream will have diluted the first of them by then. You're messing with me, aren't you? I said. Sure, let's go with that, Dr. Lee said. Also, really quickly, let's talk side effects. For the next couple of days, you might feel achy and sore, and you might run a slight fever. If that happens, don't panic. That's perfectly normal. It just means your body is learning about the diseases we want it to fight. Okay. Also, at least a couple of these are going to make you feel ravenously hungry. Go ahead and eat all you want, but avoid excessively fatty foods, since one of these is going to tell your body to purge fats in a way that absolutely challenges normal sphincter control. That's not great. It's a mess. Seriously, don't even think about trying to fart for the next 18 hours. It is not a fart. You will regret it. I don't like you. I get that a lot. Also, you may find that the color blue is giving you a migraine for the next couple of days. Blue. Yeah, we don't know why it happens. We just know it does. When it does, just look at something that's not blue for a while. You know the sky is blue, right? Yes, stay indoors, don't look up. This is unbelievable. Oh, look, I don't make it happen. I just give you the shots that make it happen. Finally, with this one, Dr. Lee pointed to one of the last syringes in the longest tray. In about 1 in 250 injections, the recipient feels the urge for, let's just say, intense and homicidal violence, like murder everyone in the building and build a pyre with their skulls level of violence. I can understand that, I assured her. No, you can't, she assured me back. Fortunately, there is a direct and accompanying side effect of extreme lassitude, which keeps most people from acting on the urge. So, like, I want to kill you, but that would mean leaving the couch. Exactly, Dr. Lee said. We call it murder stoner syndrome. That cannot be real. It is very real, my friend. We learned that certain foods help counteract the murderous urge. If it happens to you and you actually have enough energy to stand up and move around, fry up some bacon or eat a pint of ice cream or have a couple of slices of bread with butter. So, fatty foods, basically. You remember the part where you told me to avoid fatty foods, right? I do. So, just to be clear, the choices here are homicidal maniac or shit tornado. I wouldn't put it that way, and yes, but the chances are pretty good that you won't experience either side effect, much less both at the same time. And if I do, angrily consume your bacon on the toilet is my advice. Dr. Lee lifted the first syringe. Are you ready? All right, there you go. This book has actually been optioned for television, and when I had my meeting with the people, I was like, get Dr. Pimple Popper for that scene. It will do so much for that scene. Just do it. Okay, so now we are going to get to the questions. Again, remember, questions in the form of question, one-part questions, and make them as brief as you possibly can. So let's start with questions, and we'll start over here. Give us a second because they're coming around to you. Then we'll go there, and then we'll actually give this fellow right here. Yep.
I really enjoyed the book. It was great. My question is, how did you come up with the job of the guy who lifts things?
The guy who what?
Who lifts things? Like that's his job?
Oh, I mean, in the book, Jamie Gray's job is basically to lug stuff around from one place to the next. And it's because, quite frankly, you always need somebody who is doing that job. There has to be someone who is making that happen. And I think that it was important to actually acknowledge the fact that even if you have a group of scientists, there is always going to be support staff, and you actually need support staff. And support staff is no less important than the scientists, because without the support staff, the scientists aren't going to do their job. What I did do, which I don't know is necessarily true all the time in the real world, is have the scientists actually be appreciative of the support staff. Not just the scientists being appreciative of the support staff, but humans in general. You know, there is that saying that if you want to see how someone really is as a person, see how they treat their wait staff at a restaurant. And I think that's absolutely 100% true. I didn't want the people at Tanaka Base, which is the base, I didn't want to have to delve into dealing with them all being jerks. So I just unilaterally decided that they all understood that it was really good to have someone there who lifted things. So that's the answer to that. This question.
I know you said that you view yourself as writing more lighter, pop, fluffy stuff, but two things in your books have changed my life forever. The first is in the Ghost Brigades, there's a scene where two military officers are struggling with a motion sensor in a sink, and he holds his hand over the sensor that makes it work. I've suffered from that my entire life. I think about that every time I go to the bathroom now. It has changed my life. So thank you for that.
Okay. Okay, but now I'm going to say, is there a question here?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's brief. The second thing in your writing that struck me is you frequently write about grief and loss in so many of your books that comes across so honest and raw and truthful and very beautiful and touching. I've always been curious, is it something you draw from a personal well from your interior life, or is it another form of creative process?
I mean, everybody has lost people, right? Everybody has lost parents, or they have lost friends, or they have lost other people who are important to them in their lives. It's not difficult to actually sort of tap into that. Beyond that, when one, for example, becomes married, or in a really strong committed relationship, or when one has children, it's very easy to tap into the idea of the grief that you would feel if you lost them, right? So it's not. It's a common communal experience. I've experienced loss in my life just as other people have, so I was able absolutely to tap into that. But the other thing about it is that it's sometimes very difficult to, in the moment of writing, sort of connect to that. I actually very recently wrote a thing about the 30 songs that had impacted my life. And one of them was a song from Natalie Merchant that was called Beloved Wife, which I recommend everyone go listen to. And I actually prefer the live version from her live album over the one that's integrally, but that's not important, where it is sung from the point of view of a man who has just lost a wife that they've been married for 50 years. And you can tell that this is meant to be a man who is stoic and does not express his feelings. And so she is basically doing the internal dialogue that he has about this. And when I was writing the opening scene of Old Man's War, where he's standing at the grave, I was 32. And I had been married for maybe 6 years. And so while I knew of the feeling that I would have for that, there was, still something missing. So I put on that song where, and just let how her presentation of that particular story hit me. So I used that almost as a grief prosthetic to help me write that. Now I'm 50, almost 54. I've been married for 28 years. And believe me, I do not need Natalie Merchant anymore to tell me how much I would miss my wife if she was gone. But yeah, no, everybody has that emotional core, and that's one of the reasons that the scene works, is because it was universal. The other thing is that when I wrote that scene, I wanted to differentiate that particular story from all the other military science fiction that I had read, and part of the way to do that is to acknowledge that, people come into, or people leave the world with grief, with tragedy, with, sort of stuff. But they still manage to go on, and what better way to do that than to have a man at the grave of the wife that he loved. Next question, over here.
So I saw the picture of the cat with the knife. Can you tell us anything about what you're working on now?
So the upcoming book is called Starter Villain, and the concept of that story is average Joe, down on his luck, has been informed that his mysterious uncle, who he hasn't seen since he's about 5 years old, has left him his business. His business was, he was a James Bond villain. Like, complete with the volcano lair, right? Like the whole shebang. And the reason that there's a cat with a knife there is because cats play a very integral role in the story, which I don't want to reveal right now, but which is actually really, really cool. But the thing that was fun about that, just like the thing that is fun about kaiju in many ways, is taking an absolutely absurd premise, right? Dude inherits villainy business, complete with volcano lair. Or, people go to alternate Earth where there are 350-foot tall, animals, and having everybody in that story treated absolutely seriously. Like, for example, why would you have a volcano lair if you're a villain? And the answer is geothermal energy. You do not have to rely on anybody else for your power, which is really important when you're a villain because, they could just cut your power lines, but now you don't have to worry about that because you are being powered by the Earth itself. And also just this massive amount of power that you can have, which, for example, could power lasers that shoot down spy satellites or whatever it is that you need them for. Everything that is a trope or that is ridiculous, you have a good reason for. And that's part of the fun of what I get to do, is like taking these absurd premises and go, well, what does it actually mean to be, like, for example, a villain today? What is a villain? I mean, what does it mean to be a bad guy when we literally have billionaires who are just awful people, right? How do you, as a committed villain, compete with that, right? And so this is one of the things that I actually get to delve in with the book. If you're a billionaire fan, do not read Starter Villain. It's not very kind to them. I think we have time for one more question. So anyone? Here? Yeah, well, we'll try to get both of them, one in the back and then one here. And I'll try to answer as briefly as possible, and then we'll be done.
Okay, like you said, it was just a great book to read at that time. I loved it. The ending is a little bit hazy to me. Is there a chance that there will be a sequel or that you will explore this world again?
The answer to that is, how much money does Tor want to give me? I'm the first to admit that, aside from the art and the craft and everything else about, I'm extremely motivated by money. Part of it is having grown up poor and being like, wait a minute, I can actually make money from writing, which is a thing that I'm good at, and everything else I'm bad at, and also means that I can sleep in until 10 every day, maybe write for an hour, and then eventually a book comes out. Hell yeah. So the book has done very well. It's been optioned for film and TV. I would suspect if we actually get a green light for the television series, that I will go ahead and write a sequel so that we can have available for when the TV series debuts, because that's the sort of strategic thinking that means that I don't have to work on anything else in my life. But a lot of it just depends. But I will say this, if I don't have a good idea for what I would do, I'm not going to write a sequel just to write a sequel. I want to actually, there have been books where I was supposed to write a sequel, and I started writing it, and it was bad, and I just stopped, because I would rather drop a bad project that I know I can make money on than to just to have it be bad. I would rather write something else. Last question.
What is your favorite kaiju movie?
What is my favorite kaiju movie? Pacific Rim. And it is not that it's the best kaiju movie or anything else or the most influential kaiju movie, but it's the one that speaks directly to my soul. I remember watching it in the movie theater, and there's that scene where they're having the battle in Hong Kong, and the Jaeger is being lifted up by the big kaiju and taking it all the way up, and it pulls out the sword that you didn't know it had until right that moment, cuts it in half, falls down, lands in the middle of the stadium, everything blows up and it comes up, and it's like, whoa. And I just remember turning to my wife, Christine, and saying, "This is the best movie ever." It just spoke to me. And there's a scene that is based on the fact that the overseason crew at the South Pole, every year when everybody else leaves and it's just the 50 of them, they celebrate by watching The Thing, because that's the way they are. And the same thing, whenever there's a shift in crew, they have a movie night. And the movie night in this book is a double feature of the 1954 Japanese version, not the American version, of Godzilla and Pacific Rim, because these are the two movies that I think that they would absolutely watch. So we are now at the end of this. I remember I'm going to be signing in Trafalgar Square. And then immediately after this, so bring your books and anything else. And it's been lovely speaking with you all. Thank you for coming to see me.
So again, thank you to John. And please remember, as you leave and go through the day, to be as generous as possible with donations to the book festival, so we can keep this wonderful day free for everybody. Thank you very much.